We've all seen it up close. Someone rearranges the dishwasher after you've already finished loading it. Someone corrects a document that wasn't even wrong. Someone needs to know where you are, who you're with, and exactly when you'll be back. Down to the minute. From the outside, it looks like confidence, authority, strength. They seem decisive, capable, in charge. But here's the uncomfortable truth most people never stop to question. What you're seeing isn't power, it's protection. Control often disguises itself as competence because fear doesn't want to be recognized. Fear wants to look responsible, rational, necessary. So it puts on the costume of leadership and calls itself standards. It calls itself just being careful. It calls itself doing things the right way. And for a moment, it works. When everything is arranged just so, when the plan holds, the timing aligns, the rules are followed, there's a brief sense of relief, a quiet exhale, as if danger has been postponed. But that calm doesn't come from confidence. It comes from avoiding uncertainty. Real strength can tolerate things going slightly wrong. Control can't, because beneath the appearance of authority is a nervous system that doesn't feel safe unless everything is predictable, measurable, and contained. And that's where the illusion begins. What looks like dominance is often a desperate attempt to keep the world from falling apart, one corrected detail at a time. In this video, we're going beyond surface behavior to uncover what control is really protecting. We'll explore the hidden anxiety beneath it, where this pattern begins, and how both the controlling person and those affected by them can finally step out of this exhausting cycle and breathe again. Let's begin. The phrase "control freak" is usually thrown around as an insult. It conjures an image of someone rigid, bossy, impossible to please, someone who just needs to be in charge. But that label flattens something much more complex. Not all control is unhealthy. There's a difference between being structured and being strangled by structure, between taking responsibility and being unable to tolerate uncertainty. Healthy control is flexible. It can adapt when things change. Unhealthy control is brittle. It snaps the moment reality refuses to cooperate. This is where the stereotype misleads us. People with strong controlling tendencies often appear highly functional. They meet deadlines. They plan ahead. They anticipate problems before others even notice them. In work environments, they're often praised, at least at first. In relationships, they're described as reliable, protective, or on top of things. But underneath that competence is something quieter and more costly. A controlling person doesn't just prefer things done a certain way. They feel uneasy, sometimes panicked, when they're not. Their nervous system treats deviation as risk, not annoyance, risk. This is why explaining, negotiating, or reassuring rarely works. You're not arguing with a preference, you're brushing up against a survival response. And this is also why it's so hard for people with control issues to recognize themselves in the label. In their internal world, they aren't dominating. They're preventing disaster. They're holding things together. They're being responsible in a world that feels one mistake away from collapse. Understanding this doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it changes the question. Instead of asking, why are they so controlling? A more accurate question is, what feels so unsafe that control became necessary? That's where real understanding begins. To understand a controlling person, you have to stop looking at their behavior and start listening to their nervous system. Inside their mind, there is almost always a low, continuous alarm. Not loud enough to panic, not dramatic enough to be obvious, just constant. A background hum that whispers, something is about to go wrong. It shows up as thoughts that feel practical on the surface. If I don't double check this, it'll fall apart. If I don't step in now, it'll become a bigger problem later. If I relax, something will slip through the cracks. These thoughts don't feel anxious to them. They feel responsible. But the body tells a different story. Their jaw is tight. Their shoulders never fully drop. Their attention is always split, part of them listening, part of them scanning for errors. Even in moments that are supposed to be calm, their system stays alert, as if rest itself were unsafe. This is what psychologists call existential anxiety, a deep, often wordless sense that stability is fragile, that safety depends on vigilance, that if control is loosened, consequences will follow. Most people can tolerate a degree of uncertainty and trust themselves to adapt if something goes wrong. A controlling person doesn't have that internal trust, not because they're incapable, but because their system never learned that mistakes can be survived. So they compensate, they plan, they organize, they correct, they manage people the way others manage risk. Not to feel superior, but to quiet the alarm inside. And for brief moments, it works. When everything aligns, there's a subtle release. The alarm softens, the body exhales. Okay, for now, we're safe. But the relief never lasts, because life keeps moving. People improvise, variables appear, and the alarm comes back. What others experience as micromanagement is, from the inside, an attempt to keep that alarm from getting louder, to keep the internal world from tipping into chaos. That's the part no one sees. Control isn't driven by a desire to dominate reality. It's driven by a fear of being unable to survive it. For someone who lives with constant internal tension, control doesn't feel like a personality trait. It feels like medication. When they manage to make the world line up, when the plan holds, the rules are followed, the details are locked in, something subtle happens inside their body. The pressure eases, the mind quiets, the alarm drops a few notches. This is why control is so seductive. Certainty creates the illusion of safety. If everything is predictable, then nothing can surprise you. And if nothing can surprise you, then nothing can hurt you. At least, that's what the nervous system believes. Psychologists call this illusory control, the belief that by tightly regulating the environment, we can eliminate risk. But risk doesn't disappear, it just hides. A controlled environment feels calm, not because it's safe, but because it's familiar. The rules are known. The outcomes are rehearsed. There's no need to adapt in real time, and adaptation is what this nervous system fears most. So control becomes a sedative. A small correction brings relief. A fixed schedule brings relief. A perfectly executed plan brings relief. But like all sedatives, the effect is temporary. Life pushes back. Someone does things differently. A plan changes. A variable appears that can't be managed. And when that happens, the sense of safety collapses, often faster than it formed. The anxiety spikes higher than before. This creates a tragic loop. The person learns unconsciously that the only way to feel okay is to control more. More details, more people, more outcomes. What once required light structure now demands constant supervision. From the outside, this looks rigid and exhausting. From the inside, it feels necessary. They aren't chasing perfection. They're chasing relief. But the more they rely on certainty to feel safe, the less capable they feel of handling uncertainty. And slowly, without realizing it, they trade real resilience for temporary calm. Control promises safety. What it delivers is dependency. And the world, as they keep discovering, refuses to stay still long enough to be managed. One of the most painful truths about control is this: the person doing it often believes they're being loving. They don't hear themselves as intrusive. They hear themselves as careful, protective, responsible. I just want what's best for you. I'm only stepping in because I care. If I don't manage this, you'll get hurt. In their nervous system, control and care are fused. They learned, often very early, that safety came from vigilance, from watching closely, from intervening before something went wrong. So when they love someone, that same vigilance turns outward. The problem is that love and regulation are not the same thing. Love allows room for difference. Control requires sameness. Love trusts the other person's ability to navigate the world. Control assumes disaster unless guided. To the person on the receiving end, this confusion is devastating. What's framed as concern feels like surveillance. What's called protection feels like suffocation. Over time, they stop sharing freely. They start editing themselves. Not because they're dishonest, but because being fully visible carries a cost. And yet, when confronted, the controlling person is often genuinely confused. How can this be harmful? I'm doing this for us. This is the tragedy. Control feels like love to someone whose nervous system equates unpredictability with danger. Letting go doesn't feel romantic or generous. It feels reckless, unsafe, like abandoning the very thing that keeps people from getting hurt. Until that confusion is untangled, intimacy can't deepen. Because intimacy doesn't grow under supervision. It grows in mutual trust, and trust, for someone shaped by fear, is not a feeling. It's a skill that has to be learned, slowly and often painfully, over time. Control doesn't appear out of nowhere. It is almost always learned in a place where stability was missing. Many people who grow into controlling adults began as children in environments that felt unpredictable or unsafe. Homes where moods shifted without warning, where love was inconsistent, where adults were physically present but emotionally absent or emotionally explosive. In these homes, the child learned a quiet but devastating lesson. Nothing is guaranteed. One day things were calm. The next day everything could fall apart. A raised voice, a slammed door, a parent who disappeared into addiction, depression, or rage. The child had no reliable framework to lean on, no sense that someone else was holding the structure together, so they tried to do it themselves. This is often called parentification. When a child takes on responsibilities that belong to adults, they become hyper-aware of tone changes. They clean to keep the peace. They monitor behavior to prevent conflict. They learn to anticipate emotional storms before they arrive. Control, at this stage, isn't about dominance. It's about survival, and it works. The child discovers that being vigilant can reduce chaos. Being perfect can delay punishment. Being good can stabilize the room. Slowly, their nervous system wires itself around the belief that safety is something you create, not something you receive. But there's a cost. That child rarely gets to be a child. There's no space for spontaneity, mess, or rest. Their own fear has nowhere to go, so it gets buried under responsibility. Over time, this creates an ungrieved loss, the loss of being protected instead of protecting. Years later, the environment changes. The child grows up. The chaos is no longer there, but the body doesn't know that. The nervous system is still braced, still scanning, still holding the ceiling up long after the building became stable. So when they enter adult relationships or leadership roles, the old strategy comes back online. They don't control because they want to. They control because a younger part of them believes that if they don't, everything will collapse again. They aren't reacting to the present. They're responding to a past that never taught them what safety feels like when it's shared. One of the quiet tragedies of a controlling personality is this: they're still living in a crisis that no longer exists. The danger is gone. The house is no longer unstable. The people around them are not volatile or abandoning, but their nervous system never received the message. It's still operating as if collapse is one wrong move away, so they stay alert, they monitor tone, they anticipate mistakes, they correct before being asked, not because the present demands it, but because the past once did. This is what it means to fight a war that already ended. At some point in their life, hypervigilance kept them safe. It prevented explosions. It minimized harm. It gave them a sense of agency in a world that felt out of control. Their body learned, if I stay ready, I survive. But the body doesn't update itself automatically. Years later, that same readiness becomes a prison. The vigilance never powers down. Even in peaceful moments, they can't fully rest. Their system doesn't recognize safety unless it's actively being maintained. They're like a guard who never leaves their post, standing watch long after the threat has passed, convinced that lowering the weapon would be reckless. And when people around them push back, when they say, "You don't need to manage this," it doesn't register as reassurance. It registers as risk. As someone suggesting they abandon the one thing that once kept everything from falling apart. That's why logic doesn't work. That's why reassurance feels empty. They aren't resisting the present moment. They're protecting themselves from a memory their body still believes is about to repeat. Until that war is consciously acknowledged and gently laid to rest, control will continue to feel like the only way to stay alive, even in a life that no longer requires it. Control promises safety. What it rarely mentions is the price. Holding everything together requires constant effort. There is no off switch, no true rest. The mind keeps running, checking, anticipating. Over time, this leads to a quiet, chronic exhaustion. Not the kind sleep fixes, but the kind that settles into the body and stays there. Burnout becomes the baseline, but the deeper cost shows up in relationships. When one person is always managing, the relationship stops being mutual. Roles harden, one becomes the authority, the other becomes the variable. Intimacy slowly drains out, replaced by efficiency and compliance. Conversations turn strategic. Affection becomes conditional, given when things go right. For partners, friends, or children on the receiving end, the message is subtle but corrosive. You are trusted only when you follow the script. Over time, they stop offering their full selves, not out of rebellion, but out of self-preservation. And then there's joy. Joy requires presence. It requires letting moments unfold without correction. But control keeps attention split, part of the mind always scanning for what could go wrong next. Sunsets become background noise, meals turn into calculations. Even celebration carries tension, because something might disrupt it. Perhaps the most painful irony is this: the very behaviour meant to prevent loss often creates it. People pull away, children learn to hide, partners grow quiet. Not because they don't care, but because being close feels like being managed. No one warned them that control doesn't just organise life, it narrows it. And slowly, without a single dramatic collapse, the world they worked so hard to stabilise becomes smaller, quieter, and lonelier than the chaos they were trying to escape. For someone shaped by control, healing doesn't look like improvement. It looks like risk. Letting go isn't relaxing, it's terrifying. Because surrender doesn't register as peace in their body. It registers as exposure, as leaving the door unlocked, as standing still without armor. This is why advice like "just relax" or "stop worrying so much" never works. The nervous system isn't convinced by logic. It's convinced by experience. Healing begins with awareness. Catching the moment control rises and asking, am I responding to the present or to an old threat? That pause alone can feel destabilizing, but it's the first crack in the pattern. Then comes exposure, allowing small imperfections on purpose, letting someone else handle things differently, sitting with the spike of anxiety without fixing it, watching the discomfort rise and fall without catastrophe following. This is how the body relearns that uncertainty isn't the same as danger. Trust is the hardest step. Not blind trust, but earned trust. Trusting others to be competent in their own way. Trusting yourself to cope if something does go wrong. Trusting that mistakes don't erase safety. And underneath all of this is a quieter task, comforting the part that never felt protected, acknowledging that the war is over, that vigilance is no longer required for survival. Surrender, in this sense, isn't giving up control. It's giving the nervous system permission to finally rest. There is a different kind of strength that doesn't come from holding everything together. It comes from knowing when you no longer have to. Putting the armor down doesn't mean becoming careless or weak. It means trusting that you don't have to earn safety every moment of your life. That the ceiling won't collapse if you stop holding it up. That the world can move without your constant supervision, and you'll still be okay. If you see yourself in this story, know this: you were never broken. You adapted. You learned control because it once kept you safe. And now, you're allowed to choose something gentler. And if you love someone who lives this way, remember, behind the rigidity is exhaustion, not cruelty. If this video put words to something you've carried quietly, you're not alone. This channel is a space for understanding the deeper psychological patterns that shape how we protect ourselves and heal. If you found this meaningful, consider subscribing. And if any part resonated with you, share your experience in the comments below. Thank you for watching.